Welcome to the fourth episode of our brand new podcast, the CHC Podcast. I am Anna Jaworski and a heart mom to an adult with a single ventricle heart who just happens to be here tonight, which is super exciting to me. I have two co-hosts with me today.
Hello there. I am Scott Salvaggio, and I'm a congenital heart patient.
Hi, I'm Annie Alchak, and I am also a congenital heart patient.
And I am so excited for Scott and Annie to take over the interview portion of this episode. I'll be wearing a producer's cap today, but I'll be back at the end of the meeting along with my co-producer, Nicole Bilodeau, to talk with Scott and Annie about what we learned from the panel discussions.
Today's town hall meeting deals with feeling different. This is a situation that most congenital heart patients can identify with. Today we have an expert panel. Leslie Castro is a Hep C heart transplant recipient, and today she's going to tell us about how she felt different, not only medically, but also because of living a military lifestyle. Allison Holmes has dealt with congenital heart defects and cancer and will be telling us about feeling different from living with two chronic illnesses. And our third panelist is Jason Crutchley, who is a heart and liver transplant survivor. So to our panelists, tell me about an incident where you felt different than your peers because of your congenital heart defect.
I can start. I remember being in grade school and I was unable to participate in PE. And so, of course, the teachers wanted to push me, and my body wasn't allowing me to do it. So naturally, my mother had to get a doctor's note that basically limited my PE activities. And just hearing the kids make fun of me and laugh at me because I couldn't keep up. It was heartbreaking growing up with that and not knowing really what I did wrong, because in my life, I wasn't raised that I was wrong.
Yeah, pretty rough. Thank you for that response. But tell me about an incident where you felt different than your peers because of your congenital heart defect. Allison.
Okay, like everyone else said, there are many times in my life where I felt different than my peers, but one time stands out in my life more than any other. And this happened in 2013. All of my close friends were getting pregnant and having babies, and suddenly I became pregnant, which was really unexpected, but of course, my cardiologist tells me that I have to terminate the pregnancy because of my condition. So that's what happened. I had to terminate my pregnancy, and that really impacted me more than any other thing that I can remember about feeling different. And my friends, they all carried their babies to term and they have beautiful children. It's sad and heartbreaking. It doesn't keep me down, but I'll never forget it.
Of course, and thank you for being open and sharing that. It's an extremely tough situation. All right, we'll go to Leslie.
One of the things that I can relate somewhat with Jason, the same instances, like I wasn't able to do PE. I was the kid that if I was told no, I would do it anyway. The teachers at that time, and it was in the 1970s, 80s. So I would do jumping jacks. And instead, my PE teacher would be like, now you're going to write 1,000 sentences. I will not do jumping jacks in PE. Other times would be, you cannot go outside during recess time because it's too cold out and you're not able to do that. You're not able to be with your friends. And that's that. My mother was a huge advocate as far as making sure I was still a part of my PE class. I was separated from the PE class at one time because I got in trouble a lot. I wanted to do what my friends did. And so they put me in a reserved PE where I could do checkers or chess. And I said, this is not me. Just put me in the class with my regular friends in the regular PE class. And so that was the beginning.
All right. Thank you to Leslie and the rest of the panelists for your response. Allison, can you tell us about a time when you felt different specifically because you also were living with cancer?
The time with cancer was so brief. It was a difficult time, but it was quite brief compared to 51 years of living with the heart defects. But there are times when I think maybe because I have a lot of cancer in my family and I'm already a cancer survivor, that the cancer may come back, and that might be what takes me instead of my heart. So that's a concern, but feeling different because of it was just such a brief amount of time in my life.
Yeah, it's fortunate that it was so brief.
Absolutely.
Our next question is for Leslie. Can you tell us about a time you felt different, specifically related to being a military spouse living with CHD?
I lived in Hawaii right in the era of 2003, 2004. It was the very first deployments for the military to go to Iraq and Afghanistan. And they started doing video conferences with the family members, soldiers. And also at that particular time, I was going downhill. I needed the Fontan revision. So I ended up getting from the colonel's wife, you can go first doing the video conferencing, getting special privileges, but they knew I was dying. The other thing was one of the military spouses and also a soldier. And she had contacted me via phone and she said, I don't understand. You look fine. You look very healthy. You don't even look sick. You can walk. You go to the FRD, family readiness groups. I don't understand why you're getting these special privileges and why your spouse is going to return from Afghanistan so you can have a general cardiac cath. And I said, no, it's a bit different than that. My heart is stopping completely at 6-second intervals. You just can't see all the issues that I am having. But my cardiologist had wrote to this particular soldier because her husband was one of the company commanders. But she was in disbelief that I was getting special privileges. And in the end, after I had the surgery, she apologized.
Wow, that must have been so frustrating.
Yeah, to say the least. But
yeah, a lot of times we just experience initial reactions because unless someone observes our scars or sees us literally in the hospital, one wouldn't really know that we're living with a heart defect. So it's hard enough waiting for a heart transplant. In fact, one of my friends is currently in that process. Jason, can you tell us how you may or may not have felt different when waiting for both a heart and liver transplant? And also, I'm adding this. Can you explain why you needed a liver transplant as well? Because I am in a similar case.
Yeah, so it's a great question. First of all, when I needed my heart transplant, I just thought that I had pneumonia. I was completely unaware that I was having problems with my heart. I had been burning the candle at both ends, and my mother had just passed away, and I was beside myself in between the grieving of that and dealing with her affairs and working full time, and previously been assisting my mom full time. And so I just thought, man, I've got pneumonia. I'm worn out. I went into the hospital and they said, nope, you need a heart. They initially told me a heart transplant. And when they started the evaluations, they said, oh, look, you need a heart and a liver. And I said, wait, what do you mean I need a liver? They go, because of the classic Fontan surgery that I had when I was 6 years old, it increases pressures throughout the body. Those increased pressures created cirrhosis in my liver. And it's because of that, I needed the liver transplant as well. And of course, when they presented it to me, it was more of a, hey, have you ever heard of cirrhosis? Yeah, sure. My mom actually just died of it. And they were like, oh, sorry. Yeah, you have it too. I went, wait, what?
Wow.
I said, you got to be kidding me. My mom was a major alcoholic. Love you, Mom. I'm sorry. But she was a major alcoholic. I said, I don't drink like that. They said, no, it's not because of your lifestyle. It is because of your heart condition. And that was when I had them explain to me because I didn't understand the correlation there at all. But of course, once they explained it to me, it was like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense now. The downfall is that they, to this day, still can't tell me if there's anything else that has been affected by those increased pressures. So 3 months prior to my transplant, they discovered that I had hepatocellular carcinoma, which is a cancer in the liver. And again, we believe it was brought on by the increased pressures. but there is no proof of that. So of course, when they did the transplant and they biopsied the liver, they discovered the size of my carcinoma. And they've told me, look, there is a chance that your body actually made the cancer and not your heart condition. And if that's the case, then yes, it's very possible that the cancer can come back. So I get screened for that every year and I'm not worried about it. I'll cross that bridge when I get there. But yeah, so feeling wise, again, I just felt run down. I didn't notice any feeling. To this day, I have no idea what the side effects or the feelings I was supposed to have with a bad liver. I don't know. To me, it was my heart problem. But even going into my transplant, I still was apprehensive about it in the sense that I didn't feel that I needed a transplant. And I've heard that from a lot of transplant recipients that say that.
A transplant for your heart?
Yeah. They did my heart, my liver at the same time. It was the same donor. But I didn't think that I was that sick. The day of my transplant, I walked 1.5 miles.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, if you guys say so. But
yeah,
it's funny. Crazy. Looking at the picture now of my old heart, I go, wow, how did I even live with that? It was crazy.
Oh, circle back. Can you explain cirrhosis to people that are listening?
Yeah, cirrhosis it's a fatty issue with your liver. A lot of people get it from alcoholism. That's like the biggest known cause of cirrhosis. But what you're going to start seeing, and this is what my liver doctor told me, what you'll start seeing in the future is more and more people that are going to get fatty liver disease, which is the start of cirrhosis. And that's because of the obesity in the country. So you'll start seeing that more and more become more common than actual alcoholism.
Interesting. Yeah. And thank you for those questions. I can relate. Thankfully for me now, they are not talking about a transplant anytime soon, but I myself am born with a single ventricle and I'm dealing with similar liver issues. In fact, I have an appointment at the NIH tomorrow.
Yeah. When traditionally anyone that has the Fontan procedure, whether it's modified or classic,
right.
Whatever, in my case, it was a classic. I was like one of the first child to have it done. They start to actually watch for that now. More and more, they're really watching for the liver. And for all I know, they may have told my mom, hey, look, one of the side effects from this surgery is he could develop cirrhosis later in life. And I'm sure my mom, being the parent, she was like, I don't care about that right now. Make him live.
Yeah, of course.
They didn't really know something like that.
Yeah, a lot of that.
Actually, it's now just coming out within the past 15 to 20 years or so. And like you, I have valves in my liver as a single ventricle, and I get monitored every 6 months.
I'm almost 50. My parents were told that there would be a possibility of other organ failures back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, wow. That'd be interesting. Yeah, I don't hear many say that.
It was like nonchalantly, there's a possibility that it might happen, but we don't know.
Because I know kidneys and pancreas are the next ones that can get affected as well as the liver. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, we're going to move on to Allison. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Jason, for the longer explanation.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. So our next question for Allison, do you have a piece of advice that you have for your listeners regarding the experience?
I just take one day at a time. Anything could happen to any one of us at any given time. Healthy, CHC, cancer. Try to look at life with an optimistic attitude. That's something that's been hard earned for me when I was younger. I had more of a glass half empty kind of perspective, but as I've gotten older, it's changing, thankfully. So take good care of yourself, live your life to the fullest, and make the best of every day you have, because no one is promised tomorrow.
Very true. Leslie, similar for you. Do you have a piece of advice to share for everybody?
I think mainly advocating for yourself. I've been advocating since the internet started with the very first forum on the internet. And I think it's very important, along with being a former military spouse and the military lifestyle. I would say for the military families to be aware of the different organizations within the military that can help children with CHD, such as the FRG, which is Family Readiness Program, EFMP, which is Extended Family Military Program, which helps children with disabilities, as far as locating doctors in locations where your spouse or family members are jumping from one place to another, very transient, and making sure that you have the correct medical care.
Can I also suggest the American Red Cross, because they can assist families
Correct.
and deployed dependents or spouses or whoever it is back home in an emergency?
Yes, the American Red Cross would be great. I have had to use it multiple times. I have family members in the military. And the other thing is live for today. You're not always promised tomorrow, and I had a long road, but I love the things that I'm doing today and continue on day by day.
Of course. Can't say that enough. Jason, your response, the same question. Any advice?
My advice is definitely for the parents. Do not put your children in a bubble that are CHDers. It's amazing what CHD kids will discover on their own of their limitations. My mother was phenomenal at not putting me in a bubble. She said, "You want to go play football? Go ahead. When you fall on your face, I'll be right there." My grandmother was just the opposite. She did put me in the bubble, and she would not allow me to do the simplest things, get out and bike ride, go for a walk. I mean, she was a helicopter grandmother. And so, in my opinion, let your kids live. They will discover their weaknesses. And all you can do is just say, okay, I'll be here when that falls. And as far as CHDers that already are living, same thing as what everyone else, I'd like to reiterate that. Just go and live your life. Don't be afraid. Sure, you have a minor problem. I'm going to put it that way, even though we all know that they're not. But it's all in mind. It's all in your perspective. And if you sit there and you think, oh my gosh, I have the worst problem ever, you're not going to do yourself any good. So just try to be optimistic about your life and your future and what you want to do and live the best life that you can. And parents, like I said, don't let your kids live in bubbles. Let them go and explore and be kids and discover who they want to become.
Yeah, that's great. And just thinking back, I'm very thankful that for the most part, my parents had a few restrictions for me, but overall, I felt they were pretty reasonable and let me participate as much as possible in everything else. So I was riding bikes and going on hikes. Me and my brother and my dad all went through scouts, so that was good. So I want to thank the panelists for sharing. And when we come back, it'll be time for the town hall audience to ask questions or share their experiences with us.
Can you imagine having a child born with a hole in her heart while a war is ravaging your country? Imagine being told that your child would die without surgery. What would you do? I honestly couldn't put down Snow in Vietnam, a book by Amy M. Lee. Amy's mother, Snow, worked for years to save money to escape Vietnam with her daughter and nephew. For an engrossing read that will leave you wanting more, visit the quillhawkpublishing.com store. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed in the podcast are not those of Hearts Unite the Globe, but of the hosts and guests, and are intended to spark discussion about issues pertaining to congenital heart disease or bereavement.
You are listening to the CHC Podcast. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our show, please send an email to Anna Jaworski at anna@thechcpodcast.com. That's anna@thechcpodcast.com. Now, back to the CHC Podcast.
Hi, welcome back. We're talking about feeling different in today's town hall meeting. And now our audience is able to share their experiences or ask questions of our panelists. Do we have any questions?
We have a question for Jason from Michael. At what age could you have told your teachers and friends about your condition, and ultimately did it make them stop making fun of you?
No, I think kids are kids and they're going to laugh as long as they feel that it benefits them. My mom was very upfront and would tell the teachers right away. A lot of it was because, of course, I'm running around with purple lips and it was noticeable. The parents noticed it, the teachers noticed it, the kids noticed it. So yeah, it was brought up in school at a very young age. I think the first time it was brought up, it certainly was kindergarten. And it's just every year she would have to talk to the teachers and explain to them, look, Don't treat him any differently. Yes, he has a heart condition. Yes, he can still run. He can still play. He can still do whatever he needs to. But if he says, I need to take a rest, that's what he means. It's weird, kind of the things that my mom had to jump through hoops just to get me accepted by the teachers, who in turn, I guess my mom relied on them to say, okay, kids, here's Jason. And as I recalled, I don't even think there was anything really said until a student would make fun of me or whatever. And then, of course, the teacher would have a little talk with that student, but they never tried to embarrass me or anything at school about it. But I think for many years, the teachers still didn't understand. It wasn't until really I had issues at school, like I would go into tachycardia at school, and all of a sudden, the students looked at me totally different. I grew up in a small town, so you knew everyone in this town. And so at that point, now all the kids were looking out for me. They wanted to make sure that I was okay. So it's really weird, kind of that conflicting. 1 minute you're hated by all the students, and the next minute all the students are putting you up on a pedestal because now they really cared because they actually seen you go down. So it makes a big difference.
Wow.
Yeah. So that also reaffirms my unending axiom of kids are jerks, but also the fact that, and I've noticed this a little bit personally, but for heart patients, it usually isn't till people around you observe something like you actually in the hospital bed or something like that, that it clicks for them. Oh, this makes more of a difference than I thought.
Yeah. And going off of that too, even now as a transplant recipient, first of all, transplant is not a cure. People don't understand that. They think, oh, you had your transplant, you're healed. Yeah. And that is by far not the case at all. So
aren't you fixed yet?
Yeah, no.
Seriously.
I mean, I have a very physically demanding job, and they see me, they go in and I work. And then there are days I call in, I'm like, hey, I just can't get out of bed today. And they don't quite understand that. So when I show them my video of my transplant and I show them pictures of me laying in the hospital bed with all these machines and everything hooked up to me, and I show them my old heart, my old liver, all of a sudden they're like, whoa, okay, we get it. Because there's a lot of things that I have to look out for that most people don't think about at all. If it's really windy outside, I have to wear my good respirator mask. That's something that most people would take for granted, but I can't because it's aspergillus that flies around in the air. I could breathe it in. It could wind up killing me. So there's a lot of things post-transplant that, everyone again, oh, you're cured, you're fixed. No, all I did was traded one set of problems for a whole different set. And this whole different set is a brand new lifestyle.
It's so sad that you have to show these things for someone to actually believe how serious it is and what can happen.
Yeah, but it goes back to what they were saying earlier about you look at me and I look healthy. I look like I'm a strong, I can do anything. But what you don't see is what's going on internally. And I'm used to that as a child growing up with a CHD. And now as an adult, like to me, it's no different than my life before this, before transplant in that regards, and only in that regards. I'm used to just saying, whatever, this is my life. This is what I am. And either you accept me for how it is or you don't. I still have friends to this day that will come over to our house sick, even though we've told them a million times, look, if you have been sick and been around anyone that's been sick for the past 2 weeks, don't come over.
When I try to explain the transplant process to other people, I say they have to live like there's a pandemic all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's too much of an exaggeration. That really is what you deal with.
Yeah. Things lighten up as you get further and further out, but still not significantly. Again, when the wind picks up, my anxiety goes up because I know there's something in that wind that can kill me.
Jeez.
Yeah. So it's not completely gone. There's still, a lot of things that you're right. You do have to live pandemic. I've been wearing a mask long before COVID hit.
Yeah.
And funny, my friends are all like, oh yeah, you're a trendsetter. Yeah, great. That's, and you don't really want to set. Wearing a mask all the time is not fun. I get it, but I have to do it to survive sometimes.
Exactly. Do we have any more questions from the listeners?
We do. Allison had a question. I guess to the rest of the panel. Allison, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. I was curious, the cirrhosis of the liver, is that just for Fontan patients or is that for congenital heart patients in general?
I can only speak from the Fontan. I don't know about the rest. I'm certainly no doctor, but I know from the Fontan, it is very common with Fontan patients. But keep in mind, just because it's common doesn't mean that you're going to get cirrhosis. There's people that go in that have had Fontan procedures and they've only had to have a heart transplant and not the heart and liver, but they will still monitor it.
Yeah, there's many different levels of the FELD with the liver, and depending on stages and everything and what section of the stage you're in. So if your liver isn't as damaged, and by having the heart transplant, their liver starts repairing itself, which it's meant to do. That's why some patients will only need the heart. But if the liver ends up having something like cancer or degeneration to the point where the percentage is so high that having a transplanted heart will not fix it, then they really need to go and have a double transplant, the heart and the liver. And some kids, like Jason was saying, only remain on a certain point of fibrosis, but it does, as you get older.
And keep in mind, the liver regenerates itself. So that kind of goes along with what you were saying, Annie, about.
Yeah, to a certain point. And
Yeah.
Then, yeah. And then it's all stiff and bumpy.
Yeah, and I'm experiencing that. So I'm like borderline cirrhosis. I forget the term that they used last time, but it's basically like I have cirrhosis, but it's not practically affecting me at this point, which I'm very thankful for. They monitor it. I have a couple more comments, but Nicole, are there any more questions?
Yep. Annie had a question for Allison.
Yes, Allison, may I ask which cancer were you diagnosed with? And did your cardiac team work well with your oncology team?
I was diagnosed during the process of the heart and lung transplant evaluation. During the evaluation, it was found that I had a tumor the size of a small apple in my left kidney. Now, I had been seeing my doctor for a year for strange symptoms, leg pain, and repeated urinary tract infections, and it just was overlooked. So I went to my heart doctor and they said, we're going to send you to be evaluated for the heart and lung transplant. And that's when they found it with an ultrasound. And they recommended me to an oncologist. And honestly, after that surgery, I don't really remember a whole lot. I know that they went in and they took the whole kidney out and they could not do it laparoscopically. They had to cut me. So I have a lovely large scar to match the thoracotomy scar. It's like Jaws had a feast on me. But I don't really remember a lot about them working together. It was all a blur, as you can imagine. But yeah, so that was in 2002, I think.
Thank you, Allison.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions?
I think we have one more question for the panel in general from Frank.
With all the things that you went through, the issues that you dealt with when you were younger, did it make you more sensitive to other kids' problems in general or to certain specific people you knew? Did you find that you had more ability to sympathize or empathize? Jason.
Ironically, I'm just the opposite. I don't sympathize with a lot of people now, and it's simply because I see a lot of people that cry and whine and moan about really obsolete, mundane things that I don't get it. I was a unhealthy child and I thrived. Doctors told my mom I was going to live for an hour and I made it to 3 years old before I had my second surgery. And then they said, oh yeah, he won't make it to age 5. And I made it to 6. And then my first job was at 15 years old and I've been working nonstop. So I do not empathize with a lot of people that want to sit on their butts at home and not work because, oh, poor me. I'm sorry. Get off your pity pot. Go do work. Go do something. There's nothing that can be that terrible. So yeah, it's weird that I don't empathize like that.
But understandable. I get that.
Thank you.
No, I get it because I have a lateral experience to that. I don't have that many major health problems myself. I do have a daughter who suffers from congenital heart disease. Hope is my daughter. But I work in healthcare, and my tolerance for people that have minor problems that complain a lot is fairly low. I work in anesthesia, and I look at people who are complaining of small stuff, and I think, just stop it. Stop pitting yourself, because way worse stuff could happen to you.
Yeah, I feel guilty about it that I don't empathize with a lot of things. But then at the same time, I look back and I go, look at everything that I've been through, and I'm not a screw up in life. I'm not a drug addict. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a productive member of society. I've assisted with the Red Cross. I've done a lot in my life that most healthy people wouldn't even think of doing. And here I am sick.
You get what you're saying. You're not being abusive to these people. You're just not putting up with their...
Correct.
Okay. Good for you. Anybody else? Allison?
I think I relate to what Jason said. Yeah, people who just want to sit around and collect money from the government. I have no sympathy for them or empathy, but I've always connected with the elderly people or people with like Down syndrome. I used to be a behavior specialist, and I would work with people who had developmental issues. So I've been drawn to helping others in that way. And I think that it is because of what I've gone through in my own life. Those who don't want to help themselves, I don't really sympathize with them, but others who are really hurting and really could use help, my heart goes out to them and I want to help them. I want to be there to help them.
Thank you. Very good.
And Leslie?
No, I don't sympathize with anybody. It took me a long time to get back to where I am. A good year and a half. I had brain surgery and a bunch of other things amongst heart transplant, but I do my best to educate people. There are ways you can help yourself and help others. And getting off your butt and doing things, there are resources. If you want to work from home, there are jobs that you can work from home. There are jobs that you can do that you're capable. Like I said, I took a year and a half. I work 2 jobs now, and I still have difficulties walking, talking, moving my arm. They were all side effects that I had for the transplant, but I work full time and a part-time job.
I think your answers are great. I'd love to hear what you all have to say. And I think it's delightful. Good for all of you. I love people that are self-reliant and challenge themselves. And you guys, you just don't put up with it. Good for you.
No, I actually don't. And I've been all around the world. I'm going to be turning 50 this year. I booked a ticket during summer break. I'm going to traveling around Europe. I've been to over 20 countries in the world. I continue doing what I love to do.
That's amazing, Leslie.
Fantastic. Are there any more questions?
Oh, can I add something to that conversation?
Sure, go on.
Go ahead, Hope.
I was actually speaking with some friends about this recently, less about working while dealing with health conditions, but about the social aspect. And it was interesting because one of our old friends who we got in touch with again more recently is a lot more difficult now as an adult than when we were younger. And my other friends are willing to make excuses for him because his health issues have become more severe. But I find myself less inclined to just accept that as the reason why, because after everything I've been through, and I still actively try to maintain a positive attitude and be helpful to others and polite. So I find a little similar to you, Jason, that no, I've been through all this and I'm still going at it with a positive attitude. So I don't make excuses for other people who are more negative and difficult to get along with.
And I understand now, even post-transplant, I still see multiple doctors, hepatologists, neurology, you name it. I still see them, and I will have to see at least 5 or 6 departments every 6 months for the rest of my life, if not more. And it's an ongoing thing, which will never end.
Oh yeah, I know I'm going to need heart surgery again in the future, and I just have to accept that.
Right.
Yeah, so I think in general, I agree with all the panelists. I have found in my interactions that just every situation is different, and some things that are easy for one person is difficult. One example, not even necessarily related to a specific physical thing, but finding a job that will cover your insurance. If you're used to Medicaid, it's hard to find a job that will help sustain you and help you afford the medical care that you need. And obviously there's tons of caveats of where you live and stuff like that. But I think I've just learned there's some situations where I go, yeah, that's not necessarily as big of a situation as they think it is. But other times I go, wow, I don't know how I would respond dealing with that particular circumstance. I think for the most part, it just pays to have some empathy. And I've been able to relate to other people with different chronic conditions. And I encourage everybody to just be as warm as you can. And I believe I do my best to show a positive attitude. And I think I encourage everybody to just continue with that. That's all.
Yeah.
You guys did so great. Let's give Michael a chance to say something, and then we'll conclude this portion.
Hi, thanks. I wanted to point out that the reason I asked Jason the question that I asked was because we're not always aware of the ripples out from whatever we're facing. And my daughter was, I guess she was in second or third grade, and she was in school. She had double outlet right ventricle, but she also at the time was being diagnosed as autistic. The other things came later. And she was in the same school with her sister, my other daughter, my older daughter. And the kids around Liel, my daughter with the CHD and with autism, they were pretty okay. And a lot of them were also in similar situations. But her older sister would get, hey, what's wrong with your sister? And it was difficult for her in fourth grade to explain that. So she asked me to actually come into class and speak to her entire class. And I took about an hour. And I explained what is CHD in general. I explained what is double outlet right ventricle, how that works. And I hope that things got better. I wasn't worried so much for my daughter with CHD. I was worried much more for my daughter who didn't have that, because she was absorbing some of that pressure, some of that making fun of from a different angle from where you wouldn't expect it to come from. So that's the reason that I asked Jason that question.
Michael, just to add on to that, I had an older brother. And going through elementary school, yes, he would also get a lot of the brunt of the punishment, if you will, from the other kids. Same thing, them coming up to him. Hey, what's wrong with your kid brother? Why is his lips purple? You paint his lips purple. Yeah, he also got that as well. And it's funny because it's something that I never really understood until you just mentioned that. And it's, wow. Oh, yeah, interesting. Long story short, my brother passed away when I was 11.
I'm very sorry.
And yeah, it was a challenge though for me.
I'm very sorry to hear that about your brother. I just wanted to conclude with one of the things, however, that I think is beneficial in all of this is that the older sister and also their older brother, my son, now they're adults. My son is 28. My daughter is 27. And as adults, having gone through that, having had to grow up early to help take care of Liel, yeah, it was difficult for them. And I feel bad about having robbed them of a certain part of their own childhood and the way that they maybe otherwise would have wanted to grow up. But as adults, they're marvelous. They're empathetic. They see the world differently. If I'm not empathetic enough, they yell at me that I, of all people, should know better. And they're just wonderful. And I think if you can find something beneficial, there it is.
Totally agree. I have two younger siblings, and they're my biggest supporters. They're my advocate. My sister was my medical power of attorney. She was there for the whole thing, the transplant and the whole 9 yards, and said it was my brother. They went above and beyond to make sure that I was still here.
I think we missed sometimes those ripples out to the other family. When my daughter died, her cousins were writing about it and blogging about it and putting it all over the internet. And I didn't expect to see that because I didn't expect that they would be affected in such a way, but they really took it personally. Her aunts and uncles also, they took it personally. And I didn't realize that as her father, I was suddenly responsible for managing grief way outside of what I thought it would be. And that's something that we have to pay attention to. We have families, and our families are big, and our families are generally concerned with us.
It is a ripple effect. Not only that with family, but friends and small community friends that because they saw who we were, or myself, they became the doctors, the nurses, the educators, because they wanted to make sure that the things that had happened to me as a child didn't happen to other children, being ridiculed or whatever.
I think as a ripple effect too, that's why I strive so hard to try and be a mentor to transplant candidates and recipients, because there is so much that you're right. It affects the family in such a unique way. My wife is involved in it too. She's able to mentor from a caregiver standpoint, and I can mentor from a patient standpoint, and my son and my daughter and my stepson can all mentor from kids' standpoint. And so it's like our family thing now. That's what we do as a family now, which is super, super cool. But yeah, your cousins that were tweeting about it, and it's amazing how it can affect everybody.
Well, this is amazing. Thank you to our panelists and patrons for your responses and comments. This was such a great segment. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take a short break and then we'll be right back.
Anna Jaworski has written several books to empower the congenital heart defect, or CHD, community. These books can be found at Amazon.com or at her website, www.babyheartspress.com. Her bestseller is The Heart of a Mother, an anthology of stories written by women for women in the CHD community. Anna's other books, My Brother Needs an Operation, The Heart of a Father, and Hypoplastic Left Heart Syndrome, a handbook for parents, will help you understand that you are not alone. Visit babyheartspress.com to find out more.
Home Tonight Forever by the Baby Blue Sound Collective. I think what I love so much about this CD is that some of the songs were inspired by the patients.
Many listeners will understand many of the different songs and what they've been inspired by. Our new album will be available on iTunes, Amazon.com, Spotify.
I love the fact that the proceeds from this CD are actually going to help those with congenital heart defects.
Enjoy the music.
Home Tonight Forever. The CHC Congenital Heart Conversations podcast is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe, or HUG, and is part of the HUG Podcast Network. HUG is a nonprofit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to enrich the lives of our community members. For free CHD resources, please visit our website at congenitalheartdefects.com.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Now it's time for Anna and Nicole to talk about this episode with Scott and me. Anna is a heart mom and Nicole is a congenital heart patient. They were working behind the scenes during the town hall meeting. Thank you, guys.
What did you guys think about the show?
Well, I thought it was amazing. I was so impressed with the vulnerability our guests had with us. They were so open at expressing what it was that made them feel different. I've known Allison for a long time, but I don't remember knowing that she had to terminate a pregnancy, and that is just such a difficult thing to go through. So I was really appreciative of the fact that she shared that. I know others who have been born with congenital heart defects whose doctors don't believe they can carry a pregnancy to term successfully, who have also been recommended to terminate pregnancies. And that's such a hard thing to go through. But knowing that they're not the only ones, I'm sure will be a really helpful and inspiring story. So I really appreciate Allison sharing that, and knowing that Jason and Leslie both experience the same kind of thing in PE. I've heard this over and over on my podcast, Heart to Heart with Anna, where PE is that one place specifically where people who are born with congenital heart conditions stand out, and they don't want to stand out. So I appreciated them telling us how it is they felt different. I was so proud of Leslie saying how she advocated for herself even at a young age. And I think that's really hard, especially for girls. I know I never would have been able to be an advocate as a young child like she was. So I thought that that was really fascinating.
Nicole, what did you think?
I thought this was amazing. I'm a newly diagnosed heart patient. I was diagnosed last summer. I am 7 months out from surgery, so it was nice to hear that I still have a future and there's a lot of things that I can still do ultimately. And then also not being alone and feeling different. I was born with my condition and I had no clue, but I struggled in PE. I struggled with a lot of things. I was one of those gym goers that I was in the gym 4 or 5 days a week, not necessarily seeing a difference in my fitness level or in my body. And I was always the last to complete everything. And that summer after I was diagnosed, a lot of things really clicked for me.
That's crazy. And if you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you were diagnosed?
44.
Okay. Wow.
I was diagnosed with a bicuspid aortic valve. Mm-hmm. And then a week later, I had my valve replaced due to the severe aortic stenosis.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Scott, did you want to talk as well?
Yeah, I'd say in general, of course, I enjoyed it. I think I especially enjoyed hearing Jason. I have met him previously through other group chats, but hearing a little bit more about his story really helped me because I'm kind of in the first stages and I don't know when I will need a transplant or even if I will need a transplant, but it's really great to hear stories of folks like that.
That's wonderful. And then I will also say that I'm kind of the oddball here when it comes to the gym. So I am single ventricle and I can continue with what else I have. But having had the Fontaine when I was 7.5, Winter Classic by Dr. Aldo Castaneda, I could do the gym. I was, since I can remember, climbing trees. I was racing people. In the gym, I was the one that was kind of feared because I had no fear. I would play hockey, basketball. I wasn't good at basketball, but I would do it. I would run. I would jump. I would do everything and anything. And the only thing my pediatric cardiologist told my parents was, she'll know when she can't. And I could. And I did. So I never got taken out for PE. I never had to be on the sidelines. The only time was due to gynecological issues. But otherwise, I was the one always doing it. And I sadly could not do lacrosse because even though I was doing it in school, which my parents didn't know, I did all the things that they didn't know. Doing it as an actual sport in high school, my doctors, that's the only time they said no because of the chest bump. But I was actually doing that while I was in grade school. So that was interesting. And then as well as the transplant aspect, like you, I'm in that stage. It's interesting to hear how they do afterwards as patients.
Of course. And I believe I had some restrictions, but my mom was really good. And so she would reach out to the PE teachers starting even in elementary school, but even through high school. For the most part, I just participated as much as I could. And I was able to do most of the things, or at least, almost everything. It was just to the degree or stuff like that. And so I was able to participate pretty much in everything, especially if you think of just PE. I wasn't as into sports, so probably that conversation didn't come up as well. But in Scouts, I did hiking, canoeing, camping, riding my bike. And I used to climb trees a lot when I was little. So I basically just did whatever I could. And for the most part, I was fine. I didn't really feel that much different in that regard. Of course, I wasn't necessarily playing a sport competitively in high school. I knew that probably wasn't a good idea for me. But generally speaking, felt like I was able to participate as much as I could. And it was great.
That's wonderful.
What surprised you folks the most?
Well, I think what surprised me the most was how awesome all of the patrons were with their stories and with their questions. Our vision when we first, as a team, decided to try this town hall meeting venue was to actually get conversations going. And I was supposed to be the timer. And I got so wrapped up into conversations, I forgot to time half of them. So we were successful. I thought it loud and people were really very respectful and kind towards one another. And they did give a very thorough response, I felt, but they didn't hog the floor. So that made me really, really happy. I was hoping everybody would have a chance for their voice to be heard. And I believe we were successful. How did you all feel about that?
I was surprised that when we got to the question about does growing up with your heart defect make you more empathetic towards certain things, I was surprised that everybody said no, but I think that the reasons are very valid. Like I said, I grew up with mine, but I didn't know that I had mine. But I have noticed in the time since my surgery what I have gone through and what I've been able to accomplish. And I can feel myself, like people complain about little things in the back of my being like, yeah, but you didn't just have open heart surgery.
Yeah, I definitely relate to them. I think as I've gotten to know many other heart patients, I've definitely learned that everybody's situation is different. And so I've begun to appreciate the frustrations of others, especially dealing with the medical system or finding insurance and stuff like that. But yes, as a general thing, of course, I do my best. I don't understand why people get caught up in little things. You know, the fun, easy, relatable example is people taking their TVs off the wall and throwing them because their football team lost or whatever. And obviously that's an extreme example, but just realize like, hey, if you've got food on your table and place to work and people that love you, that goes a long way.
So for me, I was surprised on the empathy piece due to the fact that, yes, like Scott was saying, everyone's situation is different. And even though I've had open heart surgery and all my other and BT shunts and everything else, I think that made me more empathetic towards people out there because they may not have gone through heart surgery, but at times I feel as though that doesn't dismiss or not validate their feelings when they're going through something. And somebody will come to me and say, oh, well, you had to have a blood transfusion and I'm upset, but I'm not going to talk to you about it because you went through something so much bigger. And I'm like, no, you're upset for a reason. Something's going on and it's okay for you to have this. I want to listen to you. I want to hear you. Just like how I would hope that they would respect me enough when I'm going through something, whether it be very minor or very major, that they would just sit there and listen as well and understand that there are moments where we may see something not as big, but it still can be just as difficult.
Of course. And I find in general in life, I do empathize or feel like I connect with other people that are going through any sort of medical issue to a certain extent. And I find there's a relatable common ground, even if they're not dealing with the heart condition, but something else, because the experiences of patients is unique and it can be very frustrating and traumatizing.
Yes, agreed.
At the very least. So yeah, I think I also agree with everything that the panelists said of, yeah, you're a living reality check for yourself and for other people. Just, okay, what really matters? What is really a big deal? And for me, my priorities are always spending time with friends and family because you don't know what tomorrow will bring. And then just doing your best to be positive when you can and being honest and letting others be honest around you when they're sharing stuff.
This is great. Thank you, everyone. This is just wonderful.
All right. Without anything else, thank you all for joining us today on the CHC podcast. I hope you'll join us the next month for our Mother's Day special interview with Anita Moreno Marcelo and Misty O'Leary, and they'll be talking to us about being a single mom in the CHC community. Until then, I'm Scott Salvaggio.
And I'm Annie Alchak.
Have a great day and keep those congenital heart conversations going on Facebook and Instagram.
Thank you for joining us. The CHC Podcast can be heard wherever you get your podcasts. Visit us on Facebook or Instagram to continue the conversations. Join the Hearts Unite the Globe Patreon group and become part of our town hall meetings. It's simple. Just visit www.heartsunitetheglobe.org and select the tab that says Donate to Hug with Patreon. Then you too can be part of the conversation.